So our final essay is the classical argument essay, and I want to walk you through that. And once you've read chapter 14, you'll have a little better understanding of that material, but I want to go over some of the handouts, the kinds of things that we would normally do in an in-class lecture. And so we're going to work through these different items in this folder. So first I have just an overview of the classical argument, explaining it and its strategies and its purpose, and then talk about the assignment itself. Then I want to show you an outline that you can use that I highly recommend for you to be able to keep in mind everything that you have to do. And then we'll look at the structure, and then this sample paragraph outline, and then I have a handout over the informal fallacies. So this classical argument, the idea behind a classical argument is that you are arguing an issue, but not just to make your points. You are arguing it to convince an opponent, someone who holds an opposing viewpoint. And to do that, the best way to accomplish that is to let that opponent, the person who holds an opposing viewpoints, or several who hold opposing viewpoints, to let them know that you understand their perspectives. Normally we don't do that in an argument. All we do is we talk about our perspective, write about our views, the way we see the situation. And we seldom stop and say, well, I understand that you see the issue this way, or as I understand your perspective, you think this is important. You see things this way, you believe this, and then explain what is right and wrong about those perspectives. By considering those other perspectives, we are more likely to engage someone of an opposing viewpoint and help them see their viewpoint more realistically and then see our viewpoint. And so this is an ancient form. It's a form that the Greek and Roman orators used to state their cases and to persuade listeners to understand and agree with them. Being able to argue effectively is just an unbelievably valuable skill. It's valuable just in our personal lives. It's valuable in our workplaces, to be able to hear what someone else is saying and to see the strengths and the weaknesses of it, and then to talk about our perspective on a situation, maybe trying to solve a problem or whatever. That's just a valuable skill to be able to argue effectively. And so again, it considers the perspective of the audience, and it anticipates any objections that that audience might have to your perspective. So not an easy task, but a valuable skill and an important task. So as you think about this, first you want to find an issue that you want to argue. You're going to spend the remaining weeks, 5, 6, 7 weeks on this. And so you want to choose something that interests you and something that is arguable, something that allows for different perspectives. And so as you work through this, you will come up with a claim. Your claim is the position that you take on the issue, that it is a brief one-sentence answer to the issue question. Be aware that you are likely to reword it, to rephrase it, possibly to even change your mind as you work through and you read other viewpoints. And so as you learn more about it, you are more likely to understand the issue more clearly. You will then support that claim with a reason, basically one single kind of all-encompassing reason. And those two items together, the claim and the reason, comprise your thesis statement. And you'll place that, as always, at the end of your introduction. Then begin exploring arguments that support your claim and reason, and look for support for those arguments as you research your topic, but also look at opposing viewpoints and address them for their strengths and weaknesses. What many students find that they have to do in this assignment is research the opposing viewpoints more than they research their own, because they may know why they hold a certain opinion, why they feel a way about a perspective, take a particular stance on a perspective, on an issue. But they often don't know why someone would hold an opposing viewpoint. And so that's often where we have to go. You also want to think about any fallacies as you make an argument. We are bombarded these days with fallacies in political arguments. I am so tired of hearing individuals attacked personally when who they are personally often has very little to do with an issue. And the name calling and all of that is just completely irresponsible and unprofessional, and I think unethical. And so you want to avoid any fallacies. And again, there's a handout on that, and chapter 14 goes into those very thoroughly and gives some good examples of them. So some of that terminology is new to you, and you probably have questions about that, and I'll get to that as I work on through here. So here is the assignment. You are expected to write a classical argument. Your textbook and the Blackboard materials and handouts will help you complete the assignment. The essay, the initial version of it, will be in MLA, using MLA formatting and documentation style. Again, after that, you will revise it with new information that I provide, new teaching information in one of those later weeks. You'll revise it and reformat it. You can probably copy and paste the text of the paper in. That's what I would do. And then into an APA formatted paper, and then make the edits that you need to make in your documentation. Because the writing will be the same. It's the documentation that will be different, and the paper will be formatted differently. And the works cited will become a reference page, a references page, and will be formatted differently. So all of that. All right, so I suggest that you brainstorm several topics, explore them, and then settle in on one. Outline the frame for your argument so that you know exactly what you need to do with that, and I have the planning outline in here next. Anticipate those objections, those counter arguments, do the research that you need to do, and then put together a draft, proofread, edit, revise it. I will be looking at the closed form structure of this paper. I will be looking at the use of each of the elements that is required in this paper in the structure that I'm going to provide for you. The appropriate use of the logical paragraph construction and the argument structure, an essential part of this paper. An appropriate use of 5 outside sources. You can use 5 or more, but you must use at least 5. Outside sources. So even if you have personal knowledge and you use your own knowledge, you must also use 5 outside sources. Appropriate use of quote introduction, paraphrases, citations, and a works cited page. Correct use of MLA format and documentation. And then appropriate use of correct grammar, punctuation, mechanics, and spelling. This paper is worth 15%, and the works cited is worth an additional 5%. And so, in essence, this entire assignment, this version of it is worth 200 points. So 150 for the paper and 50 for the works cited. So I really encourage you to take your time and to work through this. So here is the planning outline that I suggest you download and save, or download and open and print, so that you can either write on this or type on this as you think through your different elements in this paper. So what is the claim? What is the statement that you want to make? That something is a certain way, or it is not a certain way, or it should be a certain way, or it should not be a certain way. That's likely to be how you will phrase, excuse me, how you will phrase your claim. And then your reason, because of some reason, because of some circumstance, because of some element of truth, or because of some data, or because of some outcome. And then what are the points that you want to make? What are the supporting points for your argument? And I ask you to have at least 3 of those. And then, what are the opposing viewpoints? Some people think this, others think this, still others think this. Some people think this instead. Some people believe that this is true. Some people think that this is important. Some people value this instead of valuing this. So what are those opposing viewpoints? Just state them. And then, how can you respond to those? How can you reply to those? The problem with this viewpoint is that it doesn't take this into consideration. The problem with this viewpoint is that it considers old data. The problem with this viewpoint is that it does this. The problem with this viewpoint is that although it's correct in these aspects, it's incorrect in these others. And so you would try to write all those things down and consider those so that you can keep them in mind as you write your paper. And then you structure your paper in this way. This is the usual order. And the reason I say the usual order is that in the last paragraph, I provide an alternative order. So you typically, well, you always begin the paper with an introduction, which would be a general discussion to the issue by doing one of these, taking one of these approaches. Maybe telling a story, providing a scenario, giving some general statistics, or something else, trying to catch the reader's attention and just introduce your topic. And you conclude that opening paragraph with your thesis statement, your claim and your reason. Now, in the next several paragraphs, and I suggest that they are 2, 3, and 4, because I ask you to have at least 3 points that you want to make, you give those points. You discuss each of those points. One reason, one important element of this issue, one aspect of this issue that's important to remember is such and such. Okay, one important feature of this, one important element, one important fact, something like that, where you discuss those 3 different points that you want to make. And then in paragraph 5, this is going to be a very short paragraph because in it you merely state those opposing viewpoints. Just as I mentioned them up here, you list them. Some people think this, others think this, others have this view, others think this about the issue. You merely state them. You don't discuss them. You merely state them. And so you begin that paragraph probably with a sentence that says, "Not everyone agrees with my perspective." And then you state how other people view the issue. You merely state them. This is where I see students get off track most, because they want to start arguing against them. You merely state them. And then in the next paragraph, and possibly multiple paragraphs, you begin responding to them. You explain what's wrong with those perspectives. Sometimes you even have to tell what's right about those perspectives. But you try to point out a flaw, a weakness in every one of those perspectives, if you can. This might require more than 1 paragraph. And then you have a conclusion. And in the conclusion, you might try to place the argument in a larger context. You might summarize your points. You might discuss why the issue is important. You might call the reader to some form of action. And so this essay must be at least 7 paragraphs long. It will be longer if you have more points to discuss. It will be longer if you require more than 1 paragraph to discuss the opposing viewpoints. If it will strengthen your argument, you may reverse the order of your points and the opposing viewpoints. So, in other words, paragraphs 2 through 4 would follow paragraphs 5 and 6, with your introduction and your conclusion remaining in place. So we will discuss this more as we look further into this assignment.